Thank you all for joining me in such an impromptu manner. Let's see if we can generate a lot of listeners, even though I only posted the promotion for this about 8 minutes ago. Because today was a tough day. Why? Well, for several reasons. I'll leave the main reason for a second, but I wanted to start off with actually an academic point. So, some of you have probably heard me mention before the self serving bias, which is a very powerful psychological phenomenon that explains how it is that people attribute successes and failures in terms of the causality of the so we all attempt things in life, we all experience things in life, and we can attribute those things internally. This thing happened to me because of me, or this thing happened to me because of something outside of me, right? And so some of you may have heard, and I'm actually thinking about, I'll definitely be talking about this in my forthcoming book on suicidal empathy, but I'm thinking of actually writing an article on it. And so you're getting, in a sense, first exposure to some of my thoughts here. Uh, so, for example, there's something called Rotter's, Rotter, who was a psychologist who created a psychometric scale to measure internal versus external locus of control. So, internal locus of control means that I attribute what happens to me to internal dispositions. I did well on the exam because I'm smart, or I did poorly on the exam because I didn't study. So both in this case, a successful event or a unsuccessful one are attributed to me. External would be, I did badly on the exam because it was my fate, because the professor is an asshole, whatever. And so the manner by which people attribute successes and failures, and certainly their ability to do so accurately, is a profoundly important uh, ability, because that's the autocorrective mechanism that allows us to understand things that are happening in our lives and then intervene, right? So if I did poorly on the exam truly because I didn't study enough, but then I blame it on the fact that my professor was mean to me, then I don't learn from the fact that I didn't study enough, and I don't implement the necessary autocorrective mechanism, right? If I'm an entrepreneur who's tried four different businesses, and every time that my business fails, it's because consumers are too stupid to understand how brilliant I am, and it could never be because I'm doing something, you know, wrongly. So, well, then there'll be no learning, so that I can intervene and hopefully do something better the next time around. So, an incredibly important reality. And yet, of course, we know from psychology that people have a unique attributional style that is what's called ego defensive or ego protective. Namely, by the way, just what I'm telling you right now, the first 4 minutes is worth more than most university degrees that you will get. And so I trust that you will be going and supporting my work in one of several possible ways. At the very least, go and subscribe to my exclusive content. I'll post oftentimes book recommendations, or I'll share articles that I love. So, a small gesture to support those that are putting things on the line, that are providing you with a lot of important content. All right, so most people end up attributing successes internally and failures externally, right? So I did very well on the exam. Well, of course, because I'm very smart. Or I did very poorly on the exam because the professor is an asshole, right? And as you can understand why that's an ego protective mechanism. Well, precisely because it's protecting my ego. When I do well, it's because I'm smart. When I do poorly, it's because, whatever, some outside force is causing this to happen. Now, for many things, that makes sense in that viewing the world through, an optimistic lens, through rose-colored prism, can be good. But as I said earlier, if it doesn't allow me to ever learn from my mistakes, then it's bad. So people who are narcissistic, I predict, would probably not be doing well in their ability to ever autocorrect due to successes because they suffer from delusions of grandeur, and therefore whenever they fail, it's because of some external force. Now, why am I talking about all this today? Now you're going to see the power of understanding human behavior and understanding psychology, why I've spent my entire life studying psychology. If you look at the reaction, so this is the first item on my why I'm pissed today. If you look at all of the people who supported the presidential candidate who had lady parts of color, because that's all that matters. What's important when you're choosing the person who's got the hands on the red button of the nuclear code, what's important is their genitalia and the color of that genitalia. So I didn't need to think any further when I was all of my progressive colleagues. It was just so exhilarating that finally we were going to break that pesky ceiling and have lady parts of color who's sitting in the White House. I mean, it literally is that. They didn't say lady parts of color. That's obviously the Gad infinite humor, but that's literally what they were saying. Okay, not verbatim, but in terms of the content. Okay, so now you got trashed, you got pulverized, you got squashed, right? 312, the final vote count of the Electoral College, 312 to 200 whatever, which, by the way, is a gross understatement in that if you look at I don't know if some of you have seen the map, it's basically all red, 95%, 99% red. And it's just a few little blue things, usually on the coast, with a few other places in the Midwest that, Chicago and so on, that is complete. I mean, you couldn't have any more lopsided. Okay, I mean, short of it being Ronald Reagan in the 80s, where he carried, I think, 49 out of 50 states or something to that effect. Okay, so you got destroyed, right? As of now, he's winning the popular vote, first time I think in I don't know how many years, 20 plus years. He destroyed you in the Electoral College. They have majority in the Senate. It looks like they're going to have majority in the House, but I don't think that's been called yet, right? So it couldn't have been, and that's notwithstanding all the stuff that was thrown on Donald Trump. So at that point, you could step back, okay, and you could say, let me analyze. So now you could see how I'm going to use the attributional causality thing, right? I can attribute the complete failure of the people that I supported to enter, like, was there something in the policies, or is there something wrong with the Democrats? Is there something wrong specifically in the policies of the Democrats? Is there something uniquely wrong about the lobotomized cackler who's a degenerate? Is there anything of those things? No. See, that would be too honest to admit that all of the deplorables, the garbage people, the great unwashed, the rubes, the degenerates, also called most Americans, it's much easier to simply say that they're just racist. So now why am I pissed off? Because you'd like to think, although I know only too well that it's not true, that you'd like to think that people who have professor, doctor before their names would be the ones who might be able to step back and say, well, wait a second, let's analyze this. Let's see why Kamala Harris was utterly destroyed in every conceivable way. But that would be honest. It's much better to attribute the failure to external forces. So now let me read you a tweet that I posted a couple of days ago. Okay, here we go. My very smart academic colleagues, many of whom are trained behavioral scientists and psychologists, have cracked the reasons that Donald Trump won. 1. A great majority of Americans are dumb degenerates who are garbage. 2. A great majority of Americans are racist and sexist. 3. A great majority of Americans don't understand democracy. 4. A great majority of Americans want to be ruled by a fascist dictator. The people who are saying these things have professor, doctor before their names. They are paid huge sums of money to understand human behavior, and they are paid huge sums of money to educate your children, right? So imagine you are a professor in the business school. Usually professors in the business school are on the top end of the salary pecking order because they are trained to do things where it can bring a lot of money, right? You can go into consulting and make 3 times as much money as you can being an academic. So in order for academia to keep you, the market conditions are such that you have to pay business school professors a lot more money. So now there are many different types of behavioral scientists in the business school, but what they all do is they try to understand economic behavior. They try to understand organizational behavior. They try to understand consumer behavior. They try to understand decision making. I mean, that's exactly what I do, right? At the intersection of consumer behavior, psychology of decision making, and evolutionary psychology. Yes? So we're paid a lot of money because ostensibly we're supposed to know something about human behavior, more so than a monkey. Yes? But it turns out that's not true because monkeys have a lot more insight when it comes to trying to crack the code of why people voted in astounding numbers for Donald Trump. That pisses me off. Why? Because let's draw some analogies. Let's suppose you went to see a surgeon because you have some problems with your appendix. And then as you sit there, you realize that your surgeon doesn't even know where your appendix is. You say, where did this person study to become a surgeon? They can't even tell, more than a plant where my appendix is. There has to be unique knowledge and skills that a surgeon has that you and I don't have. That's why they are a surgeon and you and I are not. Now, you go see a vet. Well, you see your vet and your dog is suffering from, I think it's called bloat, where your stomach inverts, and it's a very dangerous thing. And the vet says, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know anything about dogs. I can't help you. I don't know why you bring him to me. I'm a vet." Then you'd have problems with that vet. Why is it though that professors who are people who are supposed to help us understand the economy and political science and organizational behavior and consumer behavior and clinical psychology, they're all my colleagues. They're all with me in various psychology departments. Why is it that I couldn't find a single one who said, wait a second, guys, wait a second. I think I might have a reason why all of the degenerates, also called Americans, why they might have voted for Trump. Oh, well, here's a possibility. Could it be because most people don't like the idea of 6'4" guys that used to be called Gary yesterday and have 9-inch penises, but today are called Linda, can share the bathroom with my 8-year-old daughter? Could that be something that upset people? Maybe. Could that be? One of many possibilities. Could it be the fact that it is considered racist to have a closed border immigration policy where you don't let in people who can rape your wives and daughters in the range of 15 to 20 million people because it is racist to have borders? Could that be? Could it be that if you print unlimited money, that could result in inflation because nothing is any clearer in macroeconomics than what leads inflation, which is the printing of unlimited supply of money so that goes into circulation. Therefore, that causes massive inflation, where most of us have to turn tricks on the side of the street in order to be able to afford eggs. You think that could have anything to do with it? Possibly, maybe. So I just listed 3 examples. Could it be that people are tired of all the parasitic bullshit that I've been warning people about for 25 years, resulting in me writing The Parasitic Mind? Could that be it? Could it be because Kamala Harris can't finish a single sentence? She is literally a manifestation of a naturally lobotomized person. The guy who won the Nobel Prize for lobotomies, by the way, imagine there was some, and I'm going to be talking about this in Suicidal Empathy, the guy who pioneered the use of lobotomies, which of course now is no longer allowed, won the Nobel Prize for that. Well, in Kamala Harris's case, she didn't have to go through an actual surgical lobotomy. She was born lobotomized. She can't finish a single sentence. Could it be that many people listened to her, watched how she behaves, how she's unable to finish a sentence? This has nothing to do with Trump. Leave Trump out. People looked at her and said, I can't vote for someone like this. She's a moron. She can't finish a sentence, right? There are many, many other women that we can think of that could have been president that are truly presidential. They're intellectual, they're smart, they're charming, right? She wasn't any of those things. No, my colleagues decided it's because this demonstrates how much Americans are racist. Okay, let's go on. In the parasitic mind, you might remember that I spoke at great length regarding a collective malady which I referred to as Ostrich Parasitic Syndrome, OPS for short, right? So I'd like to read that to you here because it speaks to the inability to see reality, and you'd rather metaphorically bury your head in the sand. That's exactly what all of the people who are reacting to Trump's victory, but most problematically, those who are called my colleagues, are doing. So let me just go through it. So I'm going to read from you here for you here, starting on page 123. This is in chapter 6, page 123 to 124. The chapter is exactly on OPS. Okay, so of course, the desire to deny reality extends far beyond science. The human capacity for deception and self-deception is enormous. In fact, some scientists suspect one reason our intelligence evolved as is, it has is so we can manipulate others. Sorry, I misread that. Basically, the idea is that the reason why we've evolved self-deception is precisely because we can attenuate any cues that would exhibit that we are being deceptive to the other. And so if I can first self-deceive, I can better then deceive you, okay? In the service of such manipulative intent, we have evolved a parallel proclivity to self-deceive. Oh, okay, I just said that, which protects us from betraying our duplicity. The first step in being a good liar is believing the lie. Okay, so let's keep going. While these evolutionarily based reasons for deception yield adaptive benefits, there is one form of self-deception that seems rather peculiar. At times, we deny facts that are as evident as the existence of the moon. The father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, noted the human capacity to suppress unpleasant information and referred to it as this ostrich policy. Quote. That's incredible that Freud himself had used the metaphor of the ostrich burying its head in the sand. This human ostrich effect, based on the comic image of an ostrich burying its head in the sand to avoid unwelcome realities, a behavior the ostrich doesn't actually exhibit in nature, has been documented in many contexts, including in financial investments. Several years ago, when I realized that idea pathogens were causing more and more people to reject reality, I coined the term Ostrich Parasitic Syndrome, OPS. Here's how I defined this dreadful attack on reason. So as I read for you now this formal definition of OPS, link it to how people are reacting to why Trump won, an inability to accept reality. You ready? This disorder causes a person to reject realities that are otherwise as clear as the existence of gravity. Sufferers of OPS do not believe their lying eyes. They construct an alternate reality known as unicornia. In such a world, science, reason, rules of causality, evidentiary thresholds, a near infinite amount of data, data analytic procedures, inferential statistics, the epistemological rules inherent to the scientific method, rules of logic, historical patterns, daily patterns, and common sense are all rejected. Instead, the delusional ramblings of an OPS sufferer are rooted in illusory correlations, non-existent causal links, and feel-good progressive platitudes. Ostrich logic is always delivered via an air of haughty moral superiority. Okay? that's exactly what I saw when I was going in my personal Facebook page and seeing all my academic colleagues engage in just astounding elitism, right? I don't know why Trump won. Clearly, guys, we live in a unbearably racist, sexist societies where most of our degenerate fellow Americans can't accept having in the White House a person that has lady parts of color. That same person gets paid $400,000 to be a business school professor, but they couldn't come up with the mechanisms that could potentially explain why Trump might have won. Now, you will work very hard to save up money, if not go into debt, so that you can pay the $100,000+ a year to send your kid to school to learn with that professor. So hopefully now that some of you know that I have a close relationship with Elon and he's now very tight with Trump, maybe I will be able to contribute in any way that I can to help change some of the academic ecosystem. Because remember, what I explain in the parasitic mind is every single one of those parasitic ideas was spawned on university campuses by very, very smart professors. Okay, so, and here's another thing that I want to keep insisting that you guys keep your eye on the ball. Yes, many of you who are maybe listening to this were happy that Trump won, and I hope that some people who weren't happy that Trump won are also joining us, because I don't want to just preach to the converted. I'd like some people who don't necessarily agree with my positions are here listening. But the fact that Trump won could potentially serve as nothing but a doorstop to otherwise this insanity, right? Because if, yes, I mean, in 4 years he can reverse a lot of stuff, but then if it's kind of like you're 200 pounds overweight and you go on a diet, but you only go on a diet to lose 10% of the 200 pounds that you're overweight. Well, at the end of it, you're still 190 pounds over whatever it is, and then you go back to eating very heavily and you put back all the weight, right? The yo-yo diet. So it took between 50 and 100 years for all of these degenerate parasitic ideas to take over uh, every nook and cranny of our societies. So I'd like to think that it's not going to take 50 to 100 years to reverse all this ideological rapture, but it's not simply, oh, Trump is here, we've gotten the panacea, we have now the elixir of life, and we move on, we're done. What's next, right? This is a generational battle that involves us eradicating dreadful ideas, right? Today, you no longer can throw women into a body of water, and if they swim and don't drown, then they must be witches. And if they do drown, well then, oops, I guess it wasn't true that Aunt Jenny was a witch, right? We no longer do that because we've eradicated that idea. That doesn't mean that we don't have other bad ideas that have infected our brains, but that particular idea is no longer one that we organize the way that we decide whether someone is a witch or not. That's it. That's in the dustbin of history. Well, all of these parasitic ideas, postmodernism and cultural relativism and social constructivism, and or at least a radical form of social constructivism, radical feminism that denies innate sex differences, biophobia, the fear of using biology to explain any human behavior, uh, identity politics, the die cult, diversity, inclusion, equity, political correctness, a consequentialist view of freedom of speech, all of the things that I just listed off the top of my head, those are parasitic ideas that need to be defeated permanently, right? And so, yes, you could rejoice at the fact that you can't begin to imagine the bullet that was dodged by not having this imbecile come to power. But it's not just because she's an imbecile, because she's an imbecile that actually believes in things that are perfectly incongruent with every single one of the deontological principles that define American exceptionalism. Nothing could be clearer, right? When she gets up and says, well, I want to have a place where, because we all started at different places, we all need to end up at the same place. That is called something. What is that S word? Socialism. Oh, what's that C word? Communism, right? But as I've told you before, E.O. Wilson, the evolutionary biologist, explained to us that when he was asked about socialism, communism, he said, great idea, wrong species. Communism is great if you're a social ant. It's not great when you are a hierarchical species called human beings. All right. Last thing I'm going to rant about. Uh, it's on a personal level, but I hope that you can appreciate the pain. I'm trying to crack the mystery of why it is that I receive thousands of requests from people that somehow occur in a world that's fully parasitic, meaning someone makes a huge ask of me, but there is never, for example, oh, what is that thing called? Oh, expectation to be paid for my time, my effort, my energy, my having to travel 10 hours to get there, right? So let's go back to your surgeon. If you had to go see a surgeon for them to perform a surgery on you, would you say, but come on, doc, you're doing it for the cause? If you go see your vet, oh, but come on, doc, aren't you going to operate on my dog for free? If you go see your accountant, what do you mean? You're not filing my corporate taxes for free because I'm a good person? I exist in a world where, because I'm supposedly the professor of the people, I pay my mortgage just by you telling me how nice I am. So when I go to the bank, I simply go to the bank, I say, but what do you mean you expect me to pay with money? The people who make requests of me just tell me I'm a great guy. So can't I use the currency of I'm a great guy to pay my mortgage and my kids' tuition and so on? So every day I receive 3,000 requests. I mean, endless, from the most banal. Oh, we are a documentary from Hollywood. We'd like to book your time for 3 hours to help us using your behavioral science expertise. Oh, great. Here's my hourly rate. Oh, no, professor. We're thinking that, you would just do it. Oh, we'd like to invite you to give a talk. It's only a 7-hour flight from where you are. You can give a talk and we'll be raising money at that event where you are the main draw. Oh, okay, well, here's my speaker fee. Oh, no, professor. We thought it would be for free. So it's very, very hard to deal with that because it's such a violation of just human decency, right? I mean, it's one thing, someone who says, hey, can you, a colleague, hey, God, if you have an hour, can you maybe read through my paper and give me some feedback? Okay, great. But this is companies, this is governmental agencies, this is organizations, this is fundraising, this is political. I mean, it just goes on and on. This is startups, it's entrepreneurs, it's advertising firms. All of them love you, all of them want your expertise, but only a small portion of them ever expect that you might want to be paid for it. Now, I've been thinking about what maybe some of you can post comments. One of the things I've been thinking is that my forum at this point, my platform, has become so big that, in a sense, people can reach out to me at little cost. Now, if it were that there was a barrier to entry to get to me, right? So, for example, I have 3 business assistants who sift through all that stuff, then I wouldn't experience kind of the frustrations that I do, because I end up spending on any given day an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours going through endless communiques, many of which end up sucking my time, which is no good for anybody. It's a waste of my time. I could be working on a million other things, but then I end up getting sucked up in all this kind of stuff. So that's it. If you're a decent person and you approach someone and you expect them to do a service for you, then short of you being parasitic, right? I mean, that's the definition of a parasite, right? It's to the detriment of the host and to the benefit solely of the parasite, right? It's not symbiotic. It's not mutualism, right? Life doesn't operate on parasitic relationships, right? Even the barter system doesn't operate on that. So please, 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 if you are one of the ones who is going to write me, to invite me to whatever or do whatever, don't, because I'm getting pissed off at all this stuff. All right, guys, so that's it. Let me just summarize. Inability to learn from mistakes, which is linked to Roeder's internal versus external locus of control, which is related to the self-serving bias. Successes are attributed internally, failures are attributed externally. That explains why all of the supporters of Kamala Harris, including my super smart academic colleagues, are unable to make sense of why she lost. Academia and OPS, Ostrich Parasitic Syndrome, pissing me off. Entitled request. Oh, there's one more that I forgot to mention. Let me just mention it. I'm looking here at my hastily prepared list. Some of you can go, well, all of you, I hope, if you haven't watched it. The pinned tweet on my X page is a clip that I put out yesterday that's gotten, I think, over 2 million impressions since yesterday, over 1 million unique plays. So that's virality by any measure. The reason why I'm mentioning it to you is because what I was doing there is mimicking. So by the way, so just to describe, I mean, you could go watch it later. It's a 15-second clip or something. It's basically me mocking the faux fear and faux victimhood of everybody who can't make sense of why Trump won. They're so afraid to go to school because, you know, as a person of color, Trump is going to round us up into internment camps. But this is not joking. This is like literally all over my personal Facebook page, right? So I mocked that. I did a satirical clip, as I often do, where, you know, my wife is consoling me because I'm crying and so on, and it went completely viral. Now, why did I do that? Because I explained to you in the Parasitic Mind that satire is incredibly powerful. Satire is akin to the surgeon's scalpel cutting through warm butter, cutting through layers of bullshit. So when you are a grown human being, in many cases called a professor, doctor so-and-so, and you go online or you go on social media and you go, I am so afraid. I am so afraid that Donald Trump is going to round us up. I have a third cousin who is trans and I think he's going to execute all trans people. It is such an affront because, first of all, there's a falsity to it that's grotesque. But what you're doing there is an existential injury to people who truly suffered, right? So, for example, if you say, when someone complimented me on how I looked in my dress and that was a form of sexual assault, you are demeaning the real victims of sexual assault. That compliment may have been out of place, but that's not a verbal sexual assault, right? You can't be compliment raped, right? So when you start, and that's exactly what I talked about in the Parasitic Mind when I talked about the homeostasis of victimology. You keep redefining what constitutes a victim incident so that you can always appear as a victim. So Trump won. F off, deal with it, because this is a thing called democracy. The person that you wanted to win didn't win. I have had to sit through 9 years of the biggest degenerate in the history of humanity. He's called Justin Trudeau, right? I didn't hide and say I'm so afraid. He's destroyed Canada, maybe irrevocably so, but that's life. I don't go on social media and I start doing, you know, cries of fear because just, you know, it sucks. Sometimes the people that I support win, sometimes they don't. I move on, right? And I wrote at one point, I said, to all the people who are crying and are so afraid of Donald Trump, they should have lived in my childhood in Lebanon for 3 minutes. Okay? So the reason why I'm angry, it's because it really is an existential injury to have such lack of dignity. In a democracy, sometimes the one that you like wins, sometimes they don't. If that weren't the case, then it wouldn't be a democracy, right? That's why in autocratic societies that run elections, the one who wins gets 99.8% of the votes. But in a real democracy, to the extent that the US is still a real democracy, sometimes the one that we don't like wins. Deal with it and F off. All right, on that note, guys, it's time for me to go and eat. Thank you for serving as my collective therapists because I needed to get this off my chest. Please share this clip. I will be posting it also as a um, thing on my YouTube and on my podcast, probably tomorrow, maybe later tonight. Tomorrow, I'm hosting Craig Wheeler, who is an astrophysicist who's written a book about the dangers of AI. This is on the Saad Truth. On Wednesday, I'm hosting another gentleman, a journalist, who has written a book on the fact that conspiracy theories actually are more likely to stem from the left than the right. And I will also be uploading very shortly part 2 of my chat with the astoundingly brilliant British physicist and quantum computing pioneer David Deutsch, who's a gem of a person, both as a gentleman and as a human being and as a scholar. So thank you so much for your support. Again, if you wish to support me in any way, you can buy copies of my books, you can gift them to others, you can subscribe to my exclusive content. Thank you so much for paying attention, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers, everybody.